Hello to you, and welcome to AI Certified Leaders, a unique interview series for AI professionals. I'm one of your hosts, Neil Cameron, Global AI Education Manager of AI Certified. I'll be interviewing some of the most influential global AI experts, thought leaders, and practitioners to help you and your teams build practical, job ready AI capability across all the business functions you experience. I hope you enjoyed the episode and feel free to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to AI Certified Leader Series. I'm delighted to say that I'm here today with Abdullah Abu-Hassan, who is an AI solutions engineer at Microsoft. Abdullah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil, for having me.
You're very welcome. Abdullah, you're one of the most respected AI industry thought leaders and teachers around, with extensive customer-facing experience in building and architecting AI applications in large enterprise environments. You went from kind of troubleshooting Azure tickets in Oman to kind of leading Microsoft's AI transformation work across UK healthcare, all in under a decade. What's the real turning point in that story that most people never see?
Yeah, good question, Neil. So as you mentioned, I started my career as a Microsoft technical support engineer back in my hometown in Amman, Jordan. It was a very deep technical role. And from that time until now, there were various technological spotlights like blockchain, 5G, the metaverse, etc. But when ChatGPT was first released in November 2022, I knew this was the next technological revolution equivalent to the internet. And obviously, Microsoft played a very big role in that. So that was the real turning point, because I realized by then that I need to play a big role in this new wave of technology. So I guess what people never see is just the ability to separate signal from noise, especially in the technology industry, because there's a lot of noise, and just having a pragmatic view of technology. So being in the right place at the right time, essentially.
That's a brilliant reminder. I think the biggest kind of breakthroughs, really happen in the boardroom. And kind of speaking of kind of high level environments, though, you're working in one of the highest stakes and kind of most regulated environments for AI, which is healthcare. When staffing an AI project or assessing a client's team, how do you kind of tell the difference between someone generally AI capable and someone just fluent in buzzwords?
Yeah, great question as well, because in 2026, if you're fluent in buzzwords, you can go a very long way, because expertise has been democratized across many domains, including technology, especially as we rely more and more on AI. So I guess to answer your question, I'm going to separate them to builders and consumers of AI. So for builders of AI, I typically look for evidence of having an understanding of things around the model. So a lot of folks in the industry think that the most difficult part of building AI or being an AI engineer is actually the AI itself, but that's far from the truth. It's everything around the AI, and that's typically what I look for, especially in regulated industries like healthcare. So this is things like guardrails. When do you think human oversight is needed? How do you think about evals? How do you think about edge cases, governance, etc.? So these are the signals that I typically look for, not AI knowledge and the buzzwords that typically people talk about. Now, for consumers of AI, it's really as simple as, are you driving more value in your role from using these tools? Because AI at the end is just a tool. So in your existing role, buzzwords really don't make a difference. It's, are you actually driving more value in your role from using these tools? So these are the signals that I typically look for. So for builders, it's typically things around the model, and for consumers, it's, are they actually using these tools to drive more value in these roles? So yeah.
I love that distinction between kind of builders and consumers. You mentioned kind of real capability, and I suppose the buzzwords kind of fluency. It's gold in my opinion. It's exactly why I suppose so much confusion exists around what doing AI actually means at that kind of top level. Abdullah, you're inside Microsoft, building production Gen AI for FTSE 100 companies. What's the biggest myth business leaders kind of still believe about doing AI that you wish would just disappear?
Yeah, there's a lot of myths, to be honest. It's very hard to pick one, but the most common one that I see across many clients is that they think AI is merely just an IT project. So they treat it similar to any other IT project that they have. But obviously, that is a myth because AI, in my opinion, is a business transformation project. It's not an IT project. And that's because AI touches really the core of the business, if you think about it. I mean, especially as AI is getting more advanced and redefining entire business processes, and as people are talking more and implementing more and more AI agents. So the biggest myth is that AI is an IT project, and that's far from the truth because we've seen that successful AI projects often require heavy collaboration with business owners, domain experts, risk teams. Of course, engineers are needed, but you often need that collaboration with the business to actually become successful in your AI initiatives. So technology teams by themselves typically cannot redefine business workflows. In most cases, they cannot assess business risk. And in most cases, they cannot drive adoption. So it's really that partnership between IT and the business is what makes these initiatives a success. It is not merely an IT project. The business definitely needs to play a big part of that. And this is something that we see very common amongst the clients that we work with. And we try to guide them towards the fact that this is a collaborative project because as the AI is getting more advanced, going to touch every corporation in your business, and you need business people who can play a big part in that. So I say that is probably the biggest myth that I wish would be eradicated.
Brilliant. I mean, that myth busting is exactly the kind of practical clarity I think business leaders really need right now in the current climate. And kind of speaking of things that professionals urgently kind of need to act on right now, most businesses have never heard of Article 4 of the EU AI Act. Yet, from the 2nd of August this year, regulators get real enforcement power to fine companies up to 7.5 million for not kind of training their staff properly on AI. If a business leader watching this has done absolutely nothing about AI literacy yet, what's the one simple thing they should do this week, Abdullah?
Yeah, I guess this is something probably you and I observe working with multiple clients is that there's a tendency of just as a business leader starting with a generic AI training course for everyone, which is valid in many cases. But my advice is to always start with visibility before training. And what I mean by visibility is understanding where AI is already being used across the organization. Because most people in the organization are already relying on AI. So try to get an accurate picture of that first. And you only do that by speaking to each function and identifying, okay, what tools are they using? What data are they relying on? Where the risks are, etc. Once you have that visibility, once you have that clear picture, only then you can design AI trainings or give them AI trainings and give your people trainings that reflect their actual role along with their level of risk, essentially. So my advice is, as a first instinct, always start with visibility, speak to individual business units, try to understand how they're using AI, and then, only then, start to think about how do we implement or give them these AI trainings to help them become more AI literate. So yeah, visibility always comes first.
I think that's a fairly simple set of first steps, any business leader can take. Um, and there's no excuse not to kind of take it, really. I mean, building on that, for leaders who kind of want to go one step further and actually kind of test what they've been told. If a business leader, for example, has kind of zero technical background, but wants to know whether their company's AI strategy is real or just a slide deck, what are the three questions they should ask their tech team tomorrow morning?
Yeah, great question. I would say the first question I would ask is, firstly, I always say that an AI strategy always starts with a business strategy. So the first question I would ask is, what business problems are we trying to solve? Okay. Now, if the answer is vague, like improving productivity, becoming an AI native company, then there is no real strategy. So that would be my first ultimate test. Is there an actual business outcome that we are driving? Number two is, how do we know if whatever that strategy is, whatever that initiative is, how do we know it's actually working? So ideally, there should be a measurable outcome. So whether that's reducing handle time, whether that's increasing revenue, cutting costs, etc. So there has to be a measurable outcome. So that's the second step. And maybe perhaps a more technical question is, how do we measure whether that AI application that we're building or that AI strategy, how are we going to measure whether it's accurate, whether it's useful, and whether it is worth the cost? So that's when you think about things like evals and things like that. So I'd say the first question is, what is the business problem that we are trying to solve? How are we measuring that? And then it's, how do we know whether it is accurate, useful, and if it's worth the cost, essentially.
Abdullah, I think those tips could be some of the most valuable insights our community has ever heard. um, I saw on your LinkedIn profile, outside of Microsoft, you're a boxer and
Yeah,
also a competitive public speaker, which is marvelous. One might say kind of boxing rewards split second instinct, while kind of enterprise AI work rewards maybe slow, careful iteration. How do you kind of reconcile those two parts of yourself that want almost opposite things?
yeah, great question, Neil. Great question, indeed, indeed. So there's definitely a different part of me outside of work, and it's funny enough that I wind down, and my escape is oftentimes getting punched in the face. But you're right. Yes, I am a boxer indeed outside work. I always tell the people I know that there's a lot of lessons that you learn, obviously, from any sport, in my opinion. But I guess if you want to apply that to boxing, I always say that in any field, it's often the preparation that creates the instinct. So, meaning the instinct in whatever you do, so whether you're an AI engineer, whether you're a public speaker, whatever you do, the instinct often comes from thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions and rehearsed movements. And you can apply that to AI. So, good judgment in AI, whether that's architectural judgment, whether that's business judgment, all that comes from a repeated exposure to real world projects. So you can apply that similarity to boxing or any other sport. So I always say preparation, repetition is what creates the instinct. And I guess the second thing I would say is, obviously, one thing I learned from boxing is that you always have to stay calm when the plan breaks, because the plan will often break. So Mike Tyson has a famous quote saying, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So that is true in boxing. And again, I think that's true in many other sports as well. So guess what? It also happens with AI. So because AI is such a transformative technology, we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to learn. We're all trying to figure things out. So you need to really be quick in assessing whether that plan is going according to plan, and then iterate on the fly. So it's just being able to be adaptable and staying calm when things break, because things are going to break eventually. But just being able to be adaptable and iterate. So yeah.
I love that balance that you describe between kind of instinct and that kind of process that you talk
Yeah.
about. So that's really interesting. Everyone assumes real AI needs a huge budget and a data science team because that's what maybe your FTSE 100 clients have. Um, what would you actually tell a small business owner to do this year with almost no budget?
Yeah. So with no budget, I work a lot with small business owners, and my number one advice to them, and maybe even to larger enterprises as well, is you don't have to start with a big bang approach. So oftentimes when we talk about AI, we talk about these grand plans of AI transformations that are sort of like big bang approaches, which we don't have to really follow. So if you think from first principles, business owners, small or large, ultimately care about either increasing revenue or cutting costs. So if you apply that to a small business owner, I would pick one bottleneck in their business that affects either of those, increasing revenue, cutting down costs. So it could be things like leads are not being followed up with quickly. So it could be proposals taking a long time. Maybe the owners themselves are spending way too much time on admin tasks and away from selling, as an instance. So pick one specific bottlenecks that affect either of these areas, and then simply use an existing AI tool to improve that process and try to measure the impact of that. That is often the big win that you can start with. Because if you think about it, the difference between small business owners and maybe larger enterprises is that the advantage the small business owners have, I would say, is often not budget, but it's the speed. So their advantage is never budget, is always speed. So they will be able to very easily identify these bottlenecks, very easily plug in AI into these existing workflows, very easily measure the outcome as well. So yeah, try to pick a bottleneck that either affects your revenue or that increases your revenue or cut down costs. So anything that affects your bottom line, essentially.
I think that's really refreshing advice for small businesses. Yeah, thank you, Abdullah. On the flip side of that, let's talk about what happens when teams try to kind of go it alone and get it wrong. Um, what's the single most expensive mistake you see maybe small teams make when they try to build their own AI agent or Gen AI feature in-house?
Yeah, I think I've alluded to this in one of my previous answers, but from my experience, I often see teams thinking that the hard part of building AI applications is the AI itself. But as I mentioned previously, it's often the things around AI. So it's the guardrails, the security, it's the evals. And oftentimes, from my experience, I see these as afterthoughts from these teams. And in my opinion, that is a big problem, especially with agents, because that becomes very critical with agents because agents obviously take action. So if things like security, guardrails, governance are an afterthought, then that is gonna be a big problem moving forward. So I would say it's just having the misconception that the hard part is the AI itself when it's things around the AI. And the things that I see catching these teams off guard is costs as well. As you're embedding AI agents in your business processes, and obviously the more complex your business processes, the more those agents are going to be embedded within these processes, and the more tokens they're going to consume, the more money you're going to pay. So treating cost as an afterthought is a huge mistake that I see across multiple clients that we work with. So in my opinion, before embarking on any AI project, you need to have a clear plan on all of the things around the model, architecturally speaking. So again, it's things like guardrails, security, cost optimization, etc. So I'd say this is the thing that catches people off guard from my experience is having a lot of these things as an afterthought and focusing too much on the shiny demos as opposed to the realities of bringing these demos into production.
Yes, I think you've given some valuable lessons there, which pretty much every business, can use, before maybe making those mistakes themselves. I mean, I suppose on the flip side of that as well, kind of scaling up to larger organizations. Let's say, for example, a huge 10,000 person enterprise company. What actually breaks first when they try to roll out AI across the whole organization? For example, is it the technology or the people's ability to use it well?
Yeah, great question. And I think you guys probably know that as well. To be honest, it's always been people and processes in any technology transformation project. So a company can give its 10,000 people access to the best AI tools out there. That can happen. But how are you making sure that these people understand where these tools genuinely help? How can they use it safely, which is extremely, extremely, extremely important? And how do you make sure that their day-to-day process actually can adapt to these tools? So the mistake I've seen lots of organizations do is they buy an AI tool off the shelf, they give it to to their employees, and they hope for the best. But you really need to do your due diligence in terms of understanding where these tools genuinely help, helping people understand where these tools genuinely help, helping them understand how they use it safely, and not leak data as an example, and then try to understand, okay, how can that apply to their day-to-day processes, essentially? Because without that, you're going to get thousands and thousands of isolated experiments, and you're not going to be able to measure value. So, and oftentimes you end up with low adoption as well. So I would say at scale, the bottleneck is rarely access to the AI tools, it's just the ability to absorb it.
You touched on some really interesting points there. I mean, I think that people versus technology, that sort of tension kind of says a lot about maybe where the real work lies within
Yeah.
organizations of that size. And on that kind of people side specifically, enterprises are almost terrified of losing their best people to kind of AI native startups or maybe falling behind on AI, in terms of talent across the board. In your opinion, what actually keeps skilled people to stay at large, kind of slower moving companies right now?
Yeah, great question. Great question, Neil. I would say from my experience, the best people don't necessarily leave large companies because they are slow. Again, that's from my experience. They typically leave these organizations because they simply feel that they are no longer growing. Now, what I would tell large organizations is that the advantage that they have is access to huge real world projects. Okay, huge real world problems at scale, global customers, etc. So this is a massive advantage that large companies often have. But that only works when people are given real ownership, essentially. So not only just given real ownership, but also the freedom to innovate, of course, getting access to the latest tools to make them more productive. So the topic of giving your employees access to cutting edge tools is really not new. So you can apply that to software development as well, and to have the whole concept of DevOps, putting people in an environment where they can, they have the ability to productively build software. That is a topic that has been going on for decades. Okay. It's not new with AI as well. So it's just being able to really make sure that your employees have the freedom to innovate. Okay, getting access to the latest tools to make them more productive. Because if they don't have access to these tools to make them more productive, they're definitely going to leave to competitors, oftentimes smaller organizations.
Those are really important insights, I think, on retention and culture at a large whole. So I think our community definitely appreciates that sort of kind of viewpoint there, Abdullah. And it kind of sets up perfectly for where I want to maybe close this really
Yeah,
interesting conversation. So, looking 5 years ahead, Abdullah,
yeah,
what would you like the future landscape to look like for the next generation of AI certified business professionals? And what do
yeah,
you think needs to change today for that to happen?
yeah. 100%, 100%. Look, firstly, in my opinion, I don't think it's optional in 2026 to become AI literate. So everybody, in my opinion, should become AI literate. And I know this is probably one of the buzzwords in the market. So let me expand on that, because when people say AI literate, they often think that it's being able to use these tools. Of course, there's a lot of tech savvy people who know how to use these tools. That is not specifically what I'm talking about, because there is value in obviously knowing how to use these tools. But the bigger value, in my opinion, is being able to genuinely identify where AI can create value. As a business professional, you need to have a solid understanding of where AI can create genuine value in your role or in your domain. You also need the ability to understand risks as well in your domain. And you, as a business professional, you need to contribute to AI use cases in your organization. So, what I say is everyone needs to become AI literate. This is no longer optional, and it's going to become more and more relevant. Becoming AI literate is not just being able to, is not just having the ability to use these tools, but also being able to understand where these tools can add the most value. Because if you think about it, business professionals are often closer to the problem than technology teams. So you need to equip these business professionals with the knowledge of understanding where this transformational technology can actually add value within their domains, and then being able to either build it themselves, which we often see, and it's getting more and more democratized, or going back to engineering. But it's really having that AI literacy, I think, in my opinion, is no longer optional, and it has to be driven by the culture of the organization. So having that AI first mindset is really a culture. In my opinion, it's no longer optional in 2026. It's going to become more and more relevant as we move on, and as this technology is disrupting more and more businesses.
Wow, I think ending on the focus of culture, super important. Yeah, those final words really hit deep, Abdul. And I think what a way to end the interview, actually, on that note. I just want to thank you, so much for your time today. It was a pleasure kind of having you on the AI Certified Leaders Series, Abdullah.
The pleasure is mine, Neil. Thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.